Thank you very much, Chepo. One would wonder, how does the country at the tip of Africa end up having such a high-tech aerospace industry to start off with? I think a lot of it goes about where strategically we are on the continent. The influences of the Cold War had quite a significant influence, specifically South Africa, that was ostracized by the world. A lot of the innovation and idea generation had to be done internally. So we share a lot of uniquenesses with certain countries in the world, and being able to use the bare resources that we have and being able to generate some amazing pieces of technology with it. I think there are testament companies within South Africa, Sasol as an example, just in terms of extracting olefins out of coal and things such as that, which is now world-class technology. So yes, the reason of why would one get to space, besides communication, it provides you with ability to see just about everything from the vantage point that you are. It's obviously very interesting from a defense point of view. So South Africa was obviously under threat during the 80s, and this provided the context for having a program such that you would need to get into space. And specifically, as what you all know, we had a nuclear armaments program, and they needed a vehicle, for example, to get that to wherever they needed to deliver it. And that came about that a rocket program was started, and as one of the things that they realized, you also need satellites that you can then use the same rocket for. So this was all set up in the Western Cape. The Western Cape was identified. There's a lot of key specific technologies that are there, specifically around micro-manufacturing of carbon-based systems, and also explosives, etc. All the things that you require in order to make a very big rocket go very fast in order to get a payload into space. So when South Africa re-entered the international arena, most of this was put on hold. It was broken apart, and it was only again just before the turn of the century when it was restarted again on Stellenbosch University, and a company by the name of Sunspace started. And that is where the next satellite, or the first actual official satellite that South Africa launched, came from. So a company was started around that, and yes, so the engineering capacity around it was established in the Western Cape. So with that, Space Advisory Company eventually came about. We came about when Sunspace no longer existed, and that split into two sections. The Nel Space Tech was one of them, which is more the South African parastatal that looks after space, and we became the private entity that then looks after whatever technology we could. And we found a niche in the world in terms of being able to innovate, firstly on a consultancy level, providing consultancy services internationally. So we're about 85-90% of our revenue is export. So we are contracted by various agencies and science councils and industries throughout the world to provide them with consultancy services. With that, you start building a team of highly competent, highly technical people, and eventually they get tired of telling other people how to do things. They also want to do things themselves. They're engineers, they want to create things. And in the process of creating things, you also start innovating. So what we've managed to do is create a space within this consultancy where new innovation and ideas can start taking place. And that is eventually where we got to a camera system, which we managed to develop. It is a new benchmark in terms of the world, in terms of where it can do performance relative to the resolution that we could. So from optical imagery from space, to give you some facts and figures, you are traveling at about 7 kilometers a second. So you are really moving up there. So the ground is rushing past you extremely quickly. The distance that we are talking about is anything from 400 plus kilometers away. So what we managed to do with a camera is to take an image sitting probably here, looking at at Bloemfontein in perfect focus resolution, while we are traveling at 7 kilometers a second, which I'm trying to put it into words, is about 10 or 20 times faster or 30 times faster than what the Gautrain is going. So it is quite a mean feat of engineering. Nonetheless, all of that needs to fit into a volume the size of, you can fit it into the palm of your hand. So it is an extremely lightweight system. To give you an idea, to go to space, it's extremely expensive. Talking about $35,000 to $50,000 a kilogram. So every single gram makes a difference on your life cycle cost. So besides that, it needs to survive the very rough ride up to space. We are talking about, from an acoustic point of view, you're talking about 160, 150 odd dBs worth of sound pressure. To give you a perspective, standing next to a 747 taking off, that's only about 120, 130 dBs. And every 3 dBs is a doubling of sound power. So it is a phenomenal amount of sound power. Vibration as well, it's an extremely rough ride up to space, building about 9 to 10 G of vibration that the system has to handle. And then obviously you live in a complete vacuum. It's extremely cold up there, it's extremely hot up there. So you are orbiting the Earth 15 times a day. So you see hot, cold, hot, cold, hot, cold 15 times a day. We go up all the way to 90, 100 degrees centigrade down to minus 50, minus 60, minus 70 degrees centigrade. And you have to design a system that can survive within this environment. And the last thing that eventually that we don't ever expose to an Earth is something called radiation. So the ionosphere protects us from radiation, but it's extremely a harsh environment for electronic components. And these things degrade over time. So what we have is an extremely harsh environment, very expensive to get to, very remote, and we have to design things that are unserviceable. There's no way that you send a techie up to space to go and fix whatever you got wrong. You have one shot at getting it right. So we always joke that the equivalent of the satellite is the equivalent of paperwork that is just generated in terms of mass, just in terms of the system engineering. So very exciting from an engineering perspective. You have a lot of various disciplines working together. So you have mechanicals and you have thermals and you have electricals. And within all of this, you get the unique opportunity to see things that nobody else can see from space, because you are looking at the whole world wherever you want to. So getting back to the innovation, we won an innovation award at the TT100s for this innovation that we managed to come up with. It has seen a lot of success. So it's very difficult to get these things up there, because in space, nobody believes it until you've proven it, and in order to get up there, it costs you a hell of a lot of money to get up there. So you're stuck in this in this almost this chasm of how do you get to prove that your system works, and the only way you get to prove it is when it is in space. So unlike most things on planet Earth, you can show people in steps how you are doing. Our proof in the pudding is only once it's been launched and it takes its first picture. So there's a lot of faith and trust that you need of people that are funding you in order to get you to that point. So yes, managed to do that. We actually decided to self-fund it in the end. We managed to get a cheap ride up to space through a science payload program. And the advantage, well, the very unique thing about that, it came about us, we had 9 months basically since that we said yes, we're going to do this, and in 9 months we delivered a satellite and a payload, and we put it as part of a mission that got sent out from the International Space Station. And to date, it's still the only satellite that has reliably delivered data to the European Commission. It's got a science instrument on it. So it was part of a satellite constellation of 50 satellites, of which most of these satellites never even worked. So we're extremely proud of the fact that within the amount of time that we could do it, we still have a satellite that's up there. In the last month and a half, we celebrated the first year of operation, full flawless operation, also of the camera. And since then, we've managed to sell many of these units internationally. So we have the likes of Europe that is buying from us. So the Airbuses of the world are starting to procure from us. And so much so that a version of the system was taken to the moon. I think about 3 weeks ago, there's a satellite that was sent to the moon that's now orbiting beyond the moon in terms of at the second Lagrange point. And this is a relay communication system, and I believe it's the furthest piece of digital hardware that South Africa has ever manufactured that's away from planet Earth. So it's about just close on to 500,000 kilometers away from Earth, and it is actually at this moment in time going through its it's shakedown in terms of proving that it works. We also were, so this is the innovation award that we entered to the TT100s. We didn't know that you actually get evaluated as a company in terms of all of your innovation. We just thought those were a bunch of questions that you answered to get to the actual innovation point. We were then fortunate enough to also be selected as a winner on the management of systems, as well as being a finalist in all of the other categories. And I think it comes from the fact that you are so far removed, so we've gotten used to that you need to have your systems in place, you need to have your people in place, you need to have your technology in your place and your processes in place. We come out of a very process-driven world. We have very rigorous system engineering processes that we follow. So following process is something that we are begrudgingly have to do because no engineer ever wants to follow the full process. They just want to get to the end and show that it works. But because of the fact that we cannot go and maintain something or things, we are quite used to the fact that you are governed by processes. For example, you won't be able to launch a satellite if you can't prove to the launch agency that you have gone through all of the processes, because it's a multi-billion-dollar launch vehicle, and your small bit cannot cause this whole launch vehicle to fail. There are many hundreds of millions of dollars worth of equipment on board this thing. So from that perspective, we were quite comfortable with the processes part. I think in terms of the management of systems, what I saw from the Da Vinci Institute, what they gathered from that is we work across multiple spheres, as it were. We work with academia, we work with the supplier base, we work with industry, we work with government, we work with international partners, and our ability to integrate those from a systemic point of view, I believe, was what assisted us in terms of being a winner in the category. So yes, we have a strong drive from academia, where we have got students that are actively busy and researching. We are at the bleeding cutting edge of technology, so you're always trying to see how do you bring this into your design. And also having an innovation program within the company that is clearly defined. So a large continuous fight that I have with the board of directors is in reinvesting as much of the profit, as it were, in terms of into innovation, into ideation, into ensuring that we have a continuous pipeline of new ideas, new things within the market that we can produce, as well as keeping our engineers engaged, sharp, and growing our, as it were, our research and development within the organization. So from the TIPS model, it was quite interesting that you could actually generate a language suddenly where you can now see what you're busy doing. Usually you just were doing this, I wouldn't say necessarily blindly, but you didn't have the language to communicate that, oh, this is a process, or this is a technology, or this is within the framework of systems. How do you bring it all together? So from that perspective, it's been very powerful for us. It's also very useful to engage with other innovation and innovative companies, be it internationally. You can now engage on a similar language, in a similar type of, necessarily maybe suggest a framework in terms of how you can work together. As well as internally, it's a excellent communicator within with your staff. You can actually use certain using the nomenclature in terms of this word means this. We can all agree this is what innovation means. We can all agree this is what an idea is. We can all agree that this is the process that we follow in terms of going from I need to have an idea of what the market wants. I need to have an idea of what the market push or pull is, etc. So that's been very effective for us. And then we are very excited. So the next version of this camera is now coming onto line. We're hoping for a ride up to space next year on it. In terms of, this is quite a drastic improvement over the current camera. It's a hyperspectral imager, so it's not just a pretty picture anymore. It's now actually a system, even though the pretty pictures are very pretty and very useful. In terms of the user community that uses these things, all the way from urban planning to mining to water security to food security, you can see when crops start growing, etc. So there's a significant use for the satellite data. We are now moving into hyperspectral, which means that you can, at a spectrum level, start identifying what's happening. So You can see, for example, when crops start growing, if there is a healthy crop, a non-healthy crop, you can start seeing what type of emissions are being generated over certain areas, because you can actually, in a very fine resolution, start cutting up the spectrum. And all of us have a very, well, everything on Earth has a unique spectrum in terms of what it emits, so you can start identifying certain things. But what makes this all amazing is that, yes, there are hyperspectral sensors that are out there, but they fit onto massive satellites, 100, 200, 400, 2-ton, 4-ton systems, whereas we've managed to squeeze it down into a 1.35 kilogram system that can fit into the palm of your hand. And yes, it's not going to give it to you at the best resolution, but a 10-meter resolution that it can deliver at is more than enough in terms of what we require. So we believe we're again going to set a new benchmark in terms of what is possible. Very exciting that within South Africa we have the competence and the capability to do these things and to literally compete on the world stage and get people to actually buy and procure and generate income into the country with regards to that. So that, in a nutshell, at least, is what I do and what we do and what we represent. So you're welcome to ask any questions and things such as that.
Okay. Yeah, no, thank you so much, Duncan. And questions are welcome. Let me see.
Duncan, is it just the cameras that you are focused on at the moment, or are there other projects that you have in the pipeline?
No, so I think my background is not actually in optics. My background is in radar, so synthetic.
Yeah, what do you know about optics?
We know enough to be dangerous. So yes, that's always the difference between the scientists and the engineers, is that an engineer knows when it's good enough when to stop it. In terms of optics, yes, so we have got quite a competency around optical payload systems. In terms of radar systems, so you can also generate an image with a radar system. That for me is very interesting because for the optical systems you always need the sun. If there's clouds, you see a very, very nice picture of clouds, which is not very useful if somebody wants to see what's below the clouds. Mm-hmm. Typically from disaster management and monitoring point of view, when there's a disaster, it's either smoke or clouds because there's a hurricane or whatever. So a synthetic aperture radar system, which is a radar system, is able to penetrate, image the ground, and then generate an image. So it's a slightly more complex system. It's much more heavier because, in effect, you have to carry your own sun around with you. So yes, we are doing radar systems in terms of satellites. But what we truly do is we build missions and satellite programs. So that's where the consultancy and that's where the actual business does. So we work with an agency or with a council in terms of realizing their dream for a satellite. Everybody wants a satellite in space. Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, NASA. NASA did that for us. They did all the marketing in the world for us in the 60s, that they said if you want to achieve the height of science and technology, you have to be in space. And that was the arms race for the Cold War, which was between Russia and America. How much can we get up there? So they did most of the marketing for us, and everybody to date still want to do that. If you speak to any science department or any government, that is what they want to do. They want to achieve the epitome of science and technology is having something in space. So we assist them in a sustainable way. You don't have to have the largest system in space. We generate a sustainable program for them in terms of how you would do something such as that. So and that's why you see the mindset is not let's build the largest or the biggest or the fanciest. Let's build a thing that's fit for purpose within the budget or the constraints that you have. And a big thing that we do is in terms of making people self-sustainable. So we work with your teams, training your teams in terms of so that you can build the next one and that you can start growing. And I think that is our unique value proposition that we bring, is to do the human capital development and the human skills growth in terms of that, because it is a highly technical, highly unique skills development that you need. So you get graduates at master's level coming out, and then for them to still take the step to what is space is a significant leap in terms of what you still need to be, what we still need to be taught, and that is the gap that we then tend to fill. So yes, we do large systems. Large for us is up to about a half-ton system, but that's not necessarily big. The big, with all of you watching World Cup at the moment from DSTV, those satellites that go up, the geostationary telecom satellites, they're about 8-10 ton satellites. So that means that they launch the size of a minibus taxi about into space. And you can go and do the maths at $35,000 a kilogram. You can go and do the maths. So those are multi-billion rand systems. Yes.
So Duncan.
Yes.
With the, I mean, the way that space operates, it's very much process-driven, very much articulate. Certain things have to be done in a certain way, at least. But also, you're very innovative. And innovative, I mean, is to do a lot with creativity. So I'm asking myself, how do you guys balance it out? Because you have to be creative, yet very process-focused.
So yes, it's how do you break a mold in terms of taking risk. So it's managing risk for us. That comes down to the fact of, are you being too innovative that you're adding too much risk and that you cannot necessarily de-risk it to the point that it is successful. So what we're seeing in the space domain is there's a significant paradigm shift taking place. Whereas it used to be the Americas, the Russias, and the Chinas that used to launch systems, build big satellites, put them into space. Now we suddenly have the SpaceXs coming along. We have an even smaller entrants in terms of providing access to space. Now, firstly, so where it used to be $80,000 a kilogram, now it's $35,000 a kilogram. It might become $10,000 a kilogram. So now suddenly I can launch something that might break, but I can launch 3 of them, and I can reduce risk over 3 systems rather than ensuring that the one system must work. So there is one paradigm shift that's taking place. The next is that the Jeff Bezos and the Elon Musks and the Richard Bransons of the world are saying the commercial space is now moving into this realm. We apply a different model. We apply a different thinking to this, where why only launch one satellite? I'm going to launch 1,400. But that means I have to build 3 satellites a day. How do I build 3 satellites a day? So it's a massive change that's happening in our industry. And you can go and look at the OneWeb constellation. Is why? Because they want to provide broadband data services to everybody in the world at any one time. And the only way you can do that is from space. Yes, you can do it with terrestrial networks, but if you just look at the size of the African continent, for you to go and draw fiber through the whole of the African continent is a multi-trillion dollar exercise. It's not possible. Yet you can have a spacecraft. If you have enough of them, you have continuous coverage over Africa, as an example. So that is what they have done, and they've turned the manufacturing industry of spacecraft on its head. So within our group, we have an entity called New Space Systems. And they were used to selling 1 or 2 or 3 magneto-torquers, which is a system that orientates a spacecraft relative to the magnetic field. They were successful in winning the bid from Airbus, so now they have to produce 2,400 torquer rods within the next 18 or 20 months, whereas they were used to producing 1 or 2 or 3 a month. So suddenly now you're applying automotive processes and the automotive industry process. How do I set up a production line in terms of these things? Industry 4.0 is a significant player that's coming into the space domain, because it's fortunate that now we are ripe for it. How do you ensure that Industry 4.0 is done properly from the start within the space domain? So how do we manage the innovation? Because we're small, because we don't have this significant heritage that is dragging behind us, we can afford to take risk. We can afford to do something different, and we can afford to, because we can afford to fail. Whereas if an Airbus, for example, loses a satellite, they potentially lose a significant amount of future revenue, because suddenly everybody sits up and thinks, there's risk there. I might now just as well go to another entity that's half the price, that is slightly more risky. So from our perspective, we are in a niche in terms of that, is that we are able to take more risk, but at the same time we have got enough experience and expertise to know that the risk that we're taking is acceptable, and we are able to mitigate it in the engineering practice that we do, because we are used to designing much larger systems relative to all of the upstarts, which we call the cube space world, which is all the universities. So comparing us and that was a classical example in the QB50 mission where I mentioned these 50 satellites. The far majority of those were university-based startup systems and things such as that. The absolute majority of them failed because they don't necessarily have the rigorous process or the design background in terms of having to do it. So their risk-taking is far in excess of what ours would necessarily be. So managing the creativity and the innovation comes from an experience in terms of what we have, but challenging what the status quo is in terms of maybe we use a commercial component rather than a space-grade component. So to give you an idea, a space-grade FPGA, which is a chip or device that you can program, it might cost, for a commercial or industrial grade system, might cost you, let's say, $5,000 US. Space grade, $150,000. Same thing, no difference, just because of the fact that you say it's going to work in space. So we say, what can we do on a commercial or industrial system from our experience to ensure that it survives in space, but I don't have to pay the extra 120, 130,000 US dollars to get it there. And we have the experience to understand that on certain material properties you can create a environment for it that it doesn't see the radiation that might cause it to fail. So that is where we are able to innovate. We are able to innovate within the technical space. We are able to innovate within the business risk space in terms of we are able to offset what risk of in the technical with the business risk thereof. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Duncan.
Now you're putting all this stuff into space. You said instead of 1 or 2 satellites, it's now going to be like a gazillion satellites. And you're going to have spend a lot of time making cameras and stuff that work forever. But what about collisions and the space clutter? And
yeah. So the one thing is we don't design them to work forever. So the first thing is we can't guarantee that something will work forever. So the natural thing is you will have okay. So now from an orbital dynamics point of view, at a certain point, things slowly but surely come down to Earth. So if you launch them low enough, they naturally burn out within a certain period of time, and due to the forces that are experienced as on re-entry, we've all watched enough of these movies. It's a wonderful plasma fireball when it comes in. The nice thing is it pretty much melts your satellite to pieces. So some of that is taken care by that. These things deorbit naturally. They're also now starting to legislate. So there is legislation that you must, once the end of your satellite, once you've reached the end of life of your satellite, within 25 years it must deorbit. And then there are things such as drag sails that you can add and deorbiting and things such as that. So they are putting a lot of policy and a lot of legislative framework in place to ensure that space is relatively clean. Yes, there's an absolute explosion in terms of what we're going to put out. I always joke, I don't believe that it's going to be an eclipse in terms of that we're never going to see the sun. I mean, if you look at the size of a spacecraft, the one thing about space is there is a lot of space out there. I mean, you literally only have to be a few 10 or 20 meters in a different orbit, and then you never have a problem. The concerns that we have is debris. If spacecraft go into each other, it is very much, there's a lot of modeling around this, where it looks a lot like a nuclear chain reaction. As soon as one hits, then it creates debris, which hits the next one, which creates the next one. And there's a lot of speculation and postulation in terms of what to do. So now there are things such as active debris removal satellites, which are things that go out there and grab onto another satellite and then drag it back down to the Earth. So there's things such as that. But yes, it is similar to our oceans. It is similar to our environment. We can pollute it, and we need to ensure that we do it in a sustainable way. And how do you manage it in a sustainable way? So yes, we design things for it to be about 3 to 5 years of lifetime, and then it typically falls to Earth within 1 to 2 years thereafter.
So that's your standard sort of life cycle.
Yes. So and the reason why we do that, so we can do things much cheaper, which means that you can send more of them regularly up, which means you have the benefit of more regular technology updates relative to the old paradigm shift was design these large, heavy systems that need to live up there for many, many, many years. Geostationary systems are different because they sit in an orbit significantly further away from Earth. And there they are designed typically to be a 15 to 20 year lifetime. So they are designed to survive that amount of time because it's so expensive getting to geostationary orbit. There again, it's a life cycle cost balance. Yes?
Yes, Norman?
Duncan, if you put a hyperspectral satellite up into space, you'll be one of a handful of people around the world who've got that.
Yes.
What sort of specs in terms of number of channels and spectral range are you talking about?
So the system is from about 450 nanometer to about 800, 900 nanometers. So pretty much the full visual. Yeah. So it's pretty the VNR. So that's for those of you. That's the visual near infrared, visual and near infrared. 150 bands. So there's a lot of bands in terms of that. Typically a signal to noise ratios of about 100. So we're acceptable from that point. 10 meter GSD. For those of you ground sampling distance, that means you can resolve an object that's about 10 meter in pixel size. So that's about the size of a bus. To give you an idea of what man can do, and that we leave over to the defense systems. So the defense systems, keep in mind, we all have this wonderful thing called the Hubble telescope. It's one of 9. You have to ask what the other 8 are doing. They're all looking at Earth. So just remember, it was designed for a very different purpose. I have had it on good authority that they have managed to take images with that system where there was somebody sitting on a pier busy fishing, and you can actually see the fishing line going into the water, and that was due to the glint of the fishing line. So you can resolve a phenomenal amount of resolution. So typically a half meter, 0.3 meters, so that's about 30 centimeter resolution is the state of the art that we are currently experiencing from space. You then start encountering a lot of physical barriers in terms of scintillation and things such as that. But that's typically in terms of optics, that's what you can see. So to put that in perspective, those are probably multi-ton satellite systems. It's very, very large systems, one larger than 1 meter diameter apertures. So getting back to you, it's a 10-meter system, GSD. And as I said, it fits into a 2U system. I've got a few larger scales of that. Yes, we will be very unique in terms of what that is capable of. That is why we push the system. So the system that's currently in space was designed to be a hyperspectral. So all the digital electronics have already been designed to be that. So we can ingest a significant amount of data in, so about 6 or 7 gigabits per second of data can be ingested into the system, written very quickly to onboard memory storage. The problem is getting data back down to the Earth again. We have very thin data pipes to Earth, and you also have for the contact time with the satellite flying over. So that translates to, I call it almost like an asthmatic trying to breathe through a straw. It is very restrictive in terms of that. So that makes a challenge for hyperspectral data, especially on smaller systems, because you need to get the data to the ground. However, with the modern day relay satellites and things such as that, that's starting to be alleviated. So yes, we will be, again, quite revolutionary in that. We believe we are quite comfortable that the system that we are going to launch will be the highest resolution hyperspectral imager for its class at that stage, unless it's a massive system. So yes.
Yeah, the Chinese are 16 meters.
Yes, so we're very excited by it. So it's obviously okay. So it's pan sharpened, which means that it is a 10-meter pan and about a 30-meter resolution on the hyperspectral, but you can sharpen it down to 10 meters again. Yeah. Sorry, it's extremely technical. I can go into very low-level technical detail. But yes,
right.
But I know that's probably an enormous sphere of interest. So yes, we can have a chat afterwards about that. Yeah.
You can have a chat certainly afterwards. To me, you have a question?
Within the innovation IP space,
Yes.
What's your approach in terms of being in the forefront, given that other people can either copy or steal? What's your approach on that?
Borrow.
And the second question is that you mentioned that you're around about 50.
Yes.
The issue of how do you maintain, be at the forefront in terms of competencies and staff development, and the new guys that are coming in. What's the attrition of people, and then how the development of other staff?
Okay, good questions. in terms of how do you not manage to get your design out in the world, we don't patent, because patent is the first ticket to giving somebody what you've done. We do patent, so we have got a patent, but that is firstly from a marketing perspective, to say that you have a patent and this is what we can do, and it's something that is patentable, but you're not that worried if somebody copies it in that sense. So it gives you a short advantage for a period of time, and if you're comfortable enough to out-innovate somebody within that area, then you can go and patent. So we rely very much in terms on. So I come out of the world of defense. So trade secrets and not saying what you're doing is very much what the aerospace and defense world does. You don't let people know what you're doing, and we're comfortable with that, which makes it very difficult to get investors, because an investor wants the surefire thing that this is an investment that nobody will copy, but I'm not even willing to tell anybody what it is, so how am I going to invest in you? It becomes an interesting discussion. That's all I'm saying. So from that, and that also leads into the next question. So we innovate within ourselves. We do a lot of knowledge management systems within ourselves, where we manage that very, very carefully. There are unique things that we have got a core competence on, and we manage to ensure that those are through attending international conferences. So we send our thought leaders and our leaders in terms to international conferences to gain what is currently happening in the world, but to bring it back and to put it back into our systems to ensure that we try and maintain one step ahead. It also goes around focus. So we choose 2 or 3 or 4 areas that we focus on. You can't be the best in everything. Airbus and Boeing can go and be the best in everything. Why? Because they are multi-billion-dollar, 50,000 people, big organizations, but we aren't. We're 50 people, so you need to focus those individuals on key competencies that you believe you can differentiate yourself in. So that is what we do. How do we keep our people? It's the people that work in the space domain. There's 2 types. There's those that were born being a space cadet from day one. So they will work for water and bread, and they will do their work because that is the passion, the absolute passion that they have in that environment. Then there are the others that are because they are working in a high-tech industry. So it's easy to maintain working in a high-tech industry is by ensuring that if we innovate and we maintain ourselves in terms of that, it naturally keeps it interesting for the individuals that are working there. So it's a very rewarding environment to work in, to know that you have developed something that is on the far side of the moon, and you can go around the dinner table and tell your mates, what do you do? What do you do? I'm a rocket scientist. So that helps. It helps on the PR side. But it ultimately comes down to, I guess, if the safety and security are covered, if the environment is stimulating, if salaries are paid and they are competitive, then purely due to the fact that the work that we do retains the people. So that is why we realize that just doing pure consultancy, you will have a far higher staff attrition on just consultancy, and that is why we stimulate the technology drive within the core and the core competencies, but also the value of the company is the people that work for it. Without them, there is not really much value. It is the value of them that's locked in their minds, and the ability to translate what they have into something that is meaningful. So that is a very complex business to run in terms of that, is to ensure that this very valuable workforce of yours remains happy and remains engaged and remains stimulated. Did I answer all of your questions?
In terms of attrition,
yes, typical attrition. So we were very fortunate in the last 2 years. We had 0 people, 0 attrition. So we've only had growth. Recently we had, on the project management side, we had some project managements that stepped on. So that's also, I think the engineering side is one side, but then you also have the project and the business side. So because we're only a 50 big organization, there's always a 1,000 or a 10,000 big organization. So from a project manager's career path relative to an engineer's career path you have to recognize that there's a difference in terms of those. So the managers, those that want to become managers, that is a natural progression in terms of that, and we recognize that. You have to accept the fact that once you've now managed a program within what the South African constraint can support, and we are completely in the international domain, the logical step is, so we've lost them to the international, to international entities. The positive thing is that they tend to come back, and they bring back a lot of experience, a lot of different insight in terms of that. Also, what we're quite fortunate is, because we're in South Africa, we are seen by the world to be quite unique. So we get invited to quite a lot of things. So we get invited to NASA, for example, every year invites us to send people as part of their programs, because they would like Americans to also experience a different culture and a different thinking and a different way of doing things. So purely also sometimes from our geographic location, we have got advantages in terms of that. However, there is a realization that there is a ceiling. We are only as big as what we can be. The capital markets within South Africa, venture capitalism is not what it is in California or what it is in Europe. I can't wait for the fact that somebody to come along and say, here's $100 million, let's do something great. Which you just have to, I think, sneeze in California in terms of mentioning the word space, exciting, things such as that, and that is the type of capital that you would get. So, yeah, inside South Africa, we're still fundamentally not there. And I think it's fine. It's who we are, and it's the position that we are. We're striving to get there. But I think we have to recognize that we don't. So we have to find innovative ways within South Africa to access capital and to access investment in terms of growing ourselves from that.
Okay, Janet, we've got 2 minutes.
So one comment and one question. The comment is directed to you, Tsepo.
Mm-hmm.
You implied that you can't be both process-orientated and innovative. And I would suggest to you that innovation is a science as much as it's an art.
Okay, yeah.
The question, Duncan, is really, and it kind of follows on from what you said, other than the obvious funding issues. If you were responsible to say, how do we take advantage of the massive opportunities that are clearly there as a country, as a continent, what kind of systems do we have to build in order to really take what you've done and multiply it dramatically?
I think the absolute frustration that we experience is the level of government investment. And I'm not saying that government must invest everything. I think this is but what we have is there are programs such as TIA, SPI, THRIP, you name them. There's many of these entities. We've applied to all of them. We've had various successes with them. The problem is we come to them and say, here's a unique market opportunity. We want to go for this. Can you give us funding? Yes, it sounds interesting. 2 years later, you might get a thing of, oh yeah, we've now just got your application. The market's gone, the opportunity's gone. It's impossible. You cannot be competitive in the global community if it takes you a year and a half to 2 years to get an answer. So the first thing is improving access in terms of improving an efficiency of decision making, because a no is fine. That means I can propose the next idea. I just want to know yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. How can I move? Providing the level of enough innovation funding and sustain, it must be sustainable. I must know that if I apply for this, that there's a national program that will support me for the next 10 years. And that is what you'll find time and time again, whether it's South Korea, Japan, Australia has now started it. This is what we're going to do. I think the UAE is probably my best example. Their program says in 100 years, there will be a UAE community on Mars. That's the program. We're funding it. This is what we're going to do. Now you can have the whole industry, the whole of academia, everybody say, okay, for the next 100 years, I've got a program that I'm working with. I can link in, I can start generating students, I can start putting programs together, I can start getting my industry engaged in this thing. And that's what it needs. You need a long-term vision, you need a sustained funding stream behind it. So if I could magically wave a wand, I would. Yeah, we unfortunately have only got so much resources, but the fact of the matter is to state this is South Africa's long-term 30-year goal. This is where we're going. Okay. And I can promise you everything will start happening behind it, because people will say, I can invest in a 30-year goal because I know that there is a return on investment for me, and I can get much easier access to capital funding, for example, because you can say to them, don't worry, my country as a whole is investing in this direction. Give me another 15% or give me another 10% extra, and then we can go somewhere. Because as an industry, we have had to self-invest significant amounts of money, which is very difficult to come by, and that's why progress is so slow. You would drastically improve progress if you can do that. And we have got South Africans are extremely innovative. It is incredible to see what they can come up with. We are a naturally innovative, and I believe it comes from where we are and our history in terms of how we have gotten to where we are. Why can't we harness the 23-25% unemployment in this country and harness them in one direction where they know for the next 30 to 40 years, this is the direction that we're going? And that will probably, I think that's a very utopian view, but that I believe will make a significant difference in terms of at least the harnessing of what is available, the resources that there. And it goes about, ultimately, as I said, within our company, it goes about the focus. That is the focus that we're doing. And if everybody, and even we struggle with that, is to communicate to everybody, this is where we're going and this is what we're going to do. But to ensure that focus is there, and then everybody can start pulling in the right direction. Just on one last thing, the SKA for me is a great example of that. There was this idea of somebody that says we're going to be pivotal in terms of supplying the largest array within South Africa. And if you look at the amount of universities that were brought into it, Department of Science and Technology, Department of Trade and Industry, Department of Communication, all of them start slowly but surely, and you have to realize that government is like an elephant. It takes a long time before it starts changing direction. But once it moves in a certain direction, everything starts following behind it. And I think that is where we're starting to see the spin-offs that you're starting to see with it is significant. But it has a slow burn, slow ramp up.
Cool. Thanks,
Can
Duncan.
I ask the last question? I know everybody's burning.
No, it's fine. It's his time. So.
You see, so I keep him busy in my time so that I have less to say. I know everybody's burning to ask the question.
Minutes, yeah.
So is there an alternative intelligent life form?
So we're not SETI in that sense. So we're not doing the search for extraterrestrial. I think from my perspective, if I look at the vastness of the universe that is there, I would find it unique that we are the only intelligent entity that's out there.
You struggle to use the word intelligent.
And I think it depends on how you define intelligence. So,
Yeah.
but at least in terms of being able to communicate at the level that we are able to communicate, and to conceptualize in the way that we are able to conceptualize things. So, but I think I think there have been many rip-offs and jokes being made of, why would they come and talk to us? So things such as that. But I believe it's entirely possible. In terms of statistics, it should be. From a mathematical, scientific point of view, statistically, it must be possible.
Yeah.
Someday we're going to have a picture in a short while.
Yes.
All right. Let's give it up for Duncan.